Get a roll call. Call the meeting to order. 2:05 now. Technically.
Castaneda,
Here.
Minnick,
Here.
Johnson, Berlin, Benz, Tuck, Booz, Zornick,
Here.
Cleaver. 6 present, 3 absent.
First action item will be to review the approval of the July 26, the July 26, 2022 meeting minutes. Did anybody have any questions before I ask for a motion? I think it looked good to me. If there's no other questions, then can I get a motion to approve the July 26, 2022 meeting minutes?
Second.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Stephanie. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Next item is to review the online information and draft map posted. Now, this is also the same information that Jonica said. Is it Jonica? Is that her name?
Yeah.
Right way of saying it?
Yes.
That is shared with the group? Okay.
And this was the press release information, correct?
And the online, have you got online and
Online.
logged in?
So, what,
That's
I'm
not
not
in
sure
this.
what Jonica sent you, sorry.
The press release. She sent us the.
Oh, yes, I did ask her to send you the press release.
Okay.
Yes. So, is that me? Am I up now?
Is it okay, Chairman, if, just a brief recap on the timeline from our last meeting to what went out and when?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, I didn't write down dates. But yes, the press release went out on Friday. That included a flyer and the survey. So I had to create several things on the back end in order to just send out the press release. So that's somewhat of the delay. And so the survey was reviewed by legal in terms of questions to ask, so very high-level questions. So first and last name, their address, do they live within city limits? And do they agree, disagree, or they're neutral with the proposed map? And as well as, do they have specific recommendations for changes, and then a space for general feedback? The survey was also prefaced with the information about the guidelines for the map to try to educate the community regarding what the requirements were. We have had, I think, 11 responses so far. That doesn't include comments that may have come from Facebook. And I don't know if you would like for me to capture those from Facebook as part of public record.
I guess, kind of up to the chairman, but if that's part of what we kind of want to consider is the input as a committee, that's probably,
I think it would be good to capture, just because since we had already discussed about it in the previous meeting of trying to collect as much as we could. And especially to seeing if we could utilize that for identifying for potential categories that might be coming up in place.
sure. And we did, for example, we did have one comment that was asking about where the current council members live and can I have that map? And we responded back that that's not something we're supposed to consider. We haven't created that map. The committee won't be going there. So you may get those kind of comments. And if they do try to say, well, this puts council member X in this district and this one, we'd probably not have that part of the committee record or note it or something to that effect.
Yeah, I'm just a little concerned about Facebook because you share that post and then people comment on that share. And so you've got a whole bunch of comments out there that would not be gathered. And I don't know if we said at the beginning that Facebook was part of it. I assume that Facebook directs them to the online where they would make their official. I just always worry about opening a can of worms because you get into social media and there's a lot of comments you never see.
Would it matter if those
Well,
people were considered residents or not?
Right, that's
And
what
you
I was going to say. There's no way to know. So the survey clearly says, does this apply to you? Do you live within city boundaries? There's no way to know if the person replying to the Facebook post lives in Timbuktu. So that could be a concern. It could be useful anecdotal information, but I don't know if it should be part of the consideration.
Well, and I think that for the official piece, yeah, the survey is going to be making the most sense.
Okay.
But I think that part of the element too is that for some of those comments, especially that tend to come in through Facebook, they tend to fall into particular categories. So they could be just a general overall piece, and we can utilize that as possibilities. But I see your point about that you were talking about as far as in the residents, it makes a lot of sense. But, and we could just utilize that portion from the comments, at least a summary kind of a point. But there are individuals that just don't fill out surveys, so I think there's also a little bit of an important piece into that as well.
Well, there's good news. So that press release that went out, I heard the pitch on Boise State Public Radio. They didn't mention the online survey, but they did promote the 2 in-person opportunities to provide feedback. And so even people who don't want to, respond to a survey have the opportunity to come in person and give their input too.
That's great.
Mr. Chairman, I think this was good. The only thing I would add is that what was correct was Amy, we solicited feedback through a certain medium. The nature of Facebook or Nextdoor or anything like that, unless you turn comments off, those are unsolicited comments that, yeah, may be of some value, but there isn't. There wasn't an articulation from our end that we were ensuring that people who provided comments that way were going to be captured as official public comment for your consideration. So I think our focus is on what people did fill, but then the Facebook comments are maybe helpful for what it's worth, but yeah.
Yeah, there's up to a certain point kind of a situation. So I think it's just more of like an overall feel. And some of it could also be good, at least from what I'm just kind of seeing is like, it could also provide a perspective of an individual who's seeing it eyeball level, just seeing what they're reading right off the bat, to how is that looking out for the individuals who actually filled out the survey completely and are able to say, okay, this is getting an understanding. So my thought is just, is there something in the narration that's coming up that maybe they're just not getting? I mean, there's always going to be a situation into the Facebook. I think I've seen from at least some previous posts, especially relating to Facebook, and how the city of Nampa has done such a great job of being able to share that information, which, Amy, you do a great job as far as posting for those things, that, as was stated before, somebody's already replied, we've already replied back at least to one comment. It might be good to at least kind of getting just a general overall feel. I don't think we need like all the comments and to hear. It's just to kind of get an overall, what is the overall judgment that's coming in through there, and then, as what was mentioned, we just take it anecdotally, not necessarily as part of this.
So was that a don't?
I would say don't. I would
Okay.
just say just what's the overall feel.
Okay.
So that's all.
And I think, to be fair, the last time I looked, there wasn't necessarily another proposal that was
Yeah.
brought forward. So it was a question about current council and then just some personal comments.
And I think the main purpose is just, we want to get people to at least come to the open house in some form. Although, is that also available virtually?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. What a great, may I segue into the next portion of it? So I've drafted these boards, and I actually didn't mean to print them this large, but probably works out better. And that's what these are as well. So I would like to send them to the printer this week because they need a few extra days with putting the foam board on it. But essentially, one question that I came up against while I was creating this is under the next steps. I think most of these, I don't know if you'd like me to go over each board. We certainly can.
We can in just a sec, but I think Stephanie has a question.
Yeah, I do have one question about the prefacing information. So it's very clear that the districts need to be somewhat equal, as close to equal as possible. But I am concerned, just looking at the feedback, and when I saw the explanation, the part that we didn't understand at the last meeting, before we came to the last meeting, was that it's not just how far does it deviate from the target, but how far do they deviate from each other? And I'm curious if there's a way that we can clarify that extra piece.
That's also came up.
Okay. Sorry.
We got it in the survey, right? There's an explanation of it in there, right, Amy? Didn't we plug that in?
I think I added it to the website because it was more lengthy.
Okay. It does take a little bit to explain that, but I agree. I think it's worthwhile, you know, some of the comments we've got is, whoa, you're 1,000 above the other one, or, you know, I think it would be good if we can fit that into a further explanation as to what as equal as possible means.
Yeah.
And the Supreme Court, and I gave it to Amy, even has an example of the formula, how you calculate it.
Right.
And we can plug that in, we did in the website, that basically it's, your top one is how far above, what percentage above the optimal number, and your bottom one, how far below it, and then that deviation has to be within 10%.
Right. And then the other part, so it was good to see that it had that definition of contiguous, like they have to be touching. But keeping the current voter precincts together, I know that the map of the precincts was provided as part of the information that went out, and it's here in the boards. But I don't know if just looking at the suggestions that came back, if everybody's really understanding what that really means.
I think that's tough.
I know it's tough, but I don't know if there's a way to clarify it, or if we're just gonna have to explain that when people come, or, does that make sense?
So you're saying, so say that one more time,
So,
that they're touching?
so the combination of the fact that they have to be touching and you can't break them. So you can't use a piece of this district and a piece of that district. I know that we know what these numbers mean here, but I don't know that everybody else looking at the map knows what these numbers mean.
It says at the top, the red numbers are the population.
Right, and the black is the precinct, but I'm wondering, because if you look over here above, I-84, there's 1610 and 1710. If I didn't know that, ignore the 10 and look at the 16 and the 17, people may just be saying, oh, this is 10 and this is 10. Maybe this is what we can't break up. Or can I put another 13 with this 13? That type of thing. What do these numbers, the black numbers, so yeah, they're the voting precincts, but what exactly is the precinct? Does that make sense?
So you're worried maybe the two different numbers will be confusing?
Yeah.
We had our cutout pieces, so we knew what to
Yeah.
deal with, and I don't think anyone can look at that and go, yeah, this is this, this is this.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if we're being hindered somewhat by the restrictions of the law. This is just the third city in the whole state to go through this. And I wonder if those parameters couldn't just be widened more than 10% from the high to the low extreme.
Well, I think-
And I would change the law or something, but I don't see a difference if someone's got 2,000 more or less than another district, because each district has just one vote, one representative. So I don't see anyone getting an advantage.
Although I just want to
this
add
might
into
help,
here.
keep us from having a
Right.
more balanced looking map.
But I would just add into here, though, I think part of the element too is, and that's part of the piece about as far as being within the committee, you still have to follow under a particular set law. So I think for us as a committee, it's not necessarily a discussion about what we would like to change and make adjustments. It's that we have certain parameters that we're kind of set to follow. So
That's what
we're
I'm
kind
saying,
of
those
needing to do
parameters
that.
should be widened though,
I don't
and
think-
allow us a
I don't think
better
that's
way
a-
to do things.
Well, and that could be a
I
public
was-
item for a general piece, but I don't necessarily see that would really make much sense as far as for the committee, because that's not necessarily one of our roles.
Right, but I think the part, what I was asking about, and I'm assuming that you're asking something similar, is that the public, just looking at this information, do not understand how all the pieces fit together. And that's what's hitting us hard with this public feedback. They don't understand that this whole thing, this whole piece here has to stay together.
Yeah.
And we can't chop it up and put part of it with this other one. We can't anticipate growth. We have to use the numbers
Exactly.
as they were the last time the census was conducted. And I think, I don't know, that's,
I
yeah.
did mention to Rick that I'd like to start working on a video. Hopefully I could get it out this week because it is difficult to explain, and so we almost need more. Not to say that it will be any easier to explain that way.
Well,
So then, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
My question would be then, why can't we just take out those district sections and just leave it Napa? Because those district sections, encompass a lot of other ones. So if we just pulled out those district numbers and just left the way it is, I think that brings clarity to it.
so are you saying focus more like on this kind of an image right
Yeah,
now? it
where
doesn't
the
have the other-
numbers, where the districts are pulled,
Yeah.
extracted from it, then you get a better scope of what's going on.
So
Except
just,
we're
yeah.
asking people, hey, if you can create a better map, send it in, and they need those districts in order to know what they can and can't separate.
well, I
Right,
think
the population
there's-
number's bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's a district,
No, but the-
legislative district number and a precinct number, and the only one that matters for our purposes is the precinct number. So if we took out the legislative district number and just said, this is precinct 25, that might be more helpful, so that people weren't looking at, is that what you were saying? Okay.
How about,
So my question is, when I looked at the survey, I don't remember if all of the population numbers were on that map. Because I want to make sure that if we're saying, hey, if you can come up with a better map, that they've got all the information, instead of saying, well, I think
Oh,
it
look what
should
Greg
be.
did, you guys. This is awesome. Show me your.
So this is intended to be a more detailed and comprehensive version of the small version of the map. Because that's, what you guys are describing is the same struggle that we're trying to communicate is you have overlapping jurisdictions, they have different meanings, whether it's an impact area, city limit, or your precinct boundaries. So this is an attempt to try and conceptualize everything all at once. For the public house, open house, if we need to, we can create kind of simplified versions of here's a map just with your precinct boundaries, here's just a city limit,
And then
and
the-
have the parts and pieces
And then the
to.
precinct populations, so if they're trying to create their own map.
right.
They
If,
know what they can
Yeah.
do.
So she's saying that maybe it's too confusing because you've got
Right.
the precinct and the population. So can we do this and make the population numbers big? I think you still want to keep the precinct information on it, but maybe make the population the more obvious number.
Well, also, we have the precinct and the district numbers that are hyphenated.
We don't need the district.
We don't need the
can say
district.
39, 37.
She's saying eliminate all the,
36.
We either need to, Chairman, I think, and I don't know if you have a key that explains that, but maybe we just assumed what some of that numerical data was in our public piece. So it might make sense to literally just put P25, P,
yeah.
just, and so people know that this is a precinct.
Yeah.
The legislative district was more for county purposes. It's not really relevant to the city council, but the precincts are the unit, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's precinct/13.
So it does show, but it doesn't need to show, and it might be just.
That's how the county has
Confusing
it keyed.
people.
So,
Well, and it can also help for a little bit later on.
If we can call it our own thing.
Yeah, and I think it also help a little bit later on, because like I can see in some of the comments, like someone were saying, well, technically I'm not in the city. Well, it's because you're still part of that whole
Yeah.
precinct, so that could help also resolve for that kind of situation.
You won't be, he's in Caldwell.
Right, and it's part of that
Doesn't matter,
whole
you have it
little
all,
section.
thank you.
But
Yeah.
by labeling that, I think that'll help also.
Yeah.
precinct numbers should, I know the county is not here, should stay consistent,
Yes.
just so as to not cause confusion, because that is the polling location for people. So
Yeah,
I think from a,
it's another map layer.
yeah, so I'm thinking of multiple PR concerns here.
Yeah, so, but if we could just have the precinct number without the legislative district number, that may reduce the confusion. Or just very clearly label, this is, but I think people are getting confused by the two numbers.
Removing the legislative district is not a problem for us to do on the map.
But that's the balance we're trying to find, is that you have a lot of complex information you're trying to put onto
Right.
one or multiple exhibits, and this has everything on it.
Right.
But it's really hard to understand without staring at it for a while. And you guys have been looking at these type of materials for a while, so you have that background, but how do we quickly convey that to the public that doesn't understand what voting precincts mean to them?
Correct.
Would it be feasible to present this precinct and population map broken up like pieces of a puzzle, like we got as committee members to put together, and just show them just slightly separated with at least the populations on them, then people then could understand a little bit more why we had to connect this and connect
Like an
that.
interactive table.
I don't know if that's feasible or not,
If
Well, I
somebody-
mean, we
because
could,
we have all the cutouts, so could
We
that
could-
be then laid down and
maybe we could,
photographed, or,
like, laminate something and then.
Could you?
and it'd be a puzzle?
In your photo imaging tool, is there a way to take this and do a trace on the boundaries and then like pull the pieces apart?
Well, I was even thinking
Right,
from
this-
Amy's piece, I mean, we all have the pieces.
Yeah.
Eliminate a couple of these,
Mm-hmm.
and then let them have at it on a table.
Yeah.
But somebody's got to go back and occasionally put them all back in the right, because even when I was
Kind of
playing
like
with
this,
them,
Kinda like
but
that.
more,
they would get moved. and
together.
you're
I
like,
think, I
right.
think that also highlights one of the other elements too that I kind of was thinking about as far as into this. I really like how this setup is done, but you brought up a little bit piece of it, and Stephanie did as well. It's just of like, what are the restrictions? And maybe just having us placing like a 4-bullet item of like, even if you're assembling this yourself, these are the elements that still have to stay in place. The 10% from the highest to the lowest, they have to be continuous connection. Can't break up any of the, now we're calling them as just only precincts kind of a situation. And I think that also will help.
I think people would understand
Narrate for
easier
some of
that
this of
way.
why we ended up
Yeah,
with this
exactly.
unique
Yeah, I think it's a
design.
miracle that you came up with the numbers that's close
That's
as
fantastic
they
what you
are.
did with that,
It's
so-
just when I look at it, it just looks so screwy.
But I think it also, between that and just how, if anybody were to review our previous minutes, how they could immediately see, we eliminated all of our maps right off the bat. because
The
of
amount
that.
of time that everybody, all the community members spent,
Right.
and it was just a process, this doesn't meet this criteria, this doesn't meet that criteria, and lo and behold, so, yeah.
That's why I'm suggesting the criteria be loosened a little bit.
But,
We can't focus on that.
Well, I know,
Yeah.
but I mean,
but I guess, I'm sorry, I opened a can of worms and I did not intend to. I'm so sorry. The problem that I think we're facing is that we know this because we've discussed this ad nauseum, and it took us hours to unpack, reassemble, and understand this information. The public does not have the benefit of that time to unpack, put back together, and truly understand. So what is the best, clearest way to communicate quickly, for lack of a better term, this, the restrictions, the parameters that we are working within, so that people, we don't get comments like, you guys don't love North Nampa. What is the clearest way to educate the public, upfront that information, so that when they do look at the map, they understand what they're looking at? You had talked about a video, perhaps.
Right, yeah, and so that's still, I think, probably the best medium to try to communicate this. There's really not a quick way, so unfortunately, you've got to spend a little time to actually understand the rules of the game in order to play. So, yeah, I will work with Rick and Senator Lakey to, Todd. I know,
So-
I always say that, but.
And I
Chairman,
was just gonna add real quick too, and I mean, and I totally agree with you on a lot of those aspects too. But, and maybe the video is the one that's gonna make the most sense, but when it keeps coming back down to it, is for us, we are restricted to whatever was our main items. And I like this design of just, I didn't even realize that one was in there, so the 3 bullets, this is exactly the requirements, that's the ones we have to keep coming back to. That is our core elements that we're kind of
And that's where I think a video by a great presenter would wholeheartedly explain it. And you can do it in different layers. You can, here's District 1, and this is what encompasses District 1. This is the precincts that are in it. This is the number that's in it. And then 2, and then 3, and then just explanations on them. And this is how we came up with this district map.
And I would like to take a huge step back, and I would like to tell you, thank you very much for boiling this down the way it was. And I truly appreciate the difficulty of the task with which you were, the task that you were given. So, thank you.
Exciting. Hey, we're making history. May I ask the committee's feedback on, so this next steps one, after thinking about how to present this to the public, I would like to recommend that obviously next week we have the 2 open houses. These boards will be available online starting the 16th as part of our virtual open house. And I have a website that's still in process. There's some other items I think we're finalizing text that we have on that. But what I would like to propose is that we actually create a space until August 28th for the public to provide feedback if they would like to create their own map. We could try, I did see one city had done a printout and you can do your own map, and it was a little bit more of like a scrapbook puzzle than a digital format, but it at least provides a way if people want to, and I could also have them printed out here if people want to take them home with them when they come to the open house, if they would like to try to, kind of divide it up. Your next meeting is the 30th, right? So the thought would be,
Yeah.
or sorry, when is the 30th?
The 30th, so Chairman, not to distract from, hey Nate, how are you doing? Not to distract from Amy, but to kind of supplement, I think, I know we're talking about some administrative stuff to be on the same page. I don't know if legal clerk, if any of this direction is okay in the conversational format that we have, as far as, taking the legislative district out, putting in P, it doesn't require a motion, or do you want all that stuff to be formalized, or can we just kind of?
Wouldn't it be a motion, though, along with the amended items, though? If we were to ask?
At the end, Mr. Chairman, you can break it up into a couple motions if it's clear. If you want to try to have a big omnibus motion, you could do that, but it might be easier to break it up, but I'd let you decide that.
Yeah, it was just, and we're good. It wasn't to try to distract. I just wanted to make sure that we were formalizing the direction so that there wasn't any confusion that if Amy, myself, or Craig Tarter were to do something and you said, that's not what I wanted, or there's some sort of confusion over it. If it is formalized, we just have the luxury of you guys as a committee are speaking collectively. But to Amy's point about, is there wisdom, because we were talking about this internally, is there wisdom in having a cutoff public comment? Comments must be received by the 28th as the final cutoff. And to include, if you want to submit a map, that means when you convene on the 30th, which is our last meeting on schedule, but it doesn't have to be the last meeting, okay? That was just for logistical purposes. It was scheduled that way. If you want to convene on the 30th, if there was only one map and you wanted to act on that, the ordinance says that you must adopt by resolution as a committee the map that the clerk would then file, and then it starts the process of then sending it up to city council for final approval. I know legal would have to draft kind of a boilerplate template resolution to bring into the 30th, and then you would fill in the logistical parameters. And so, or you might gather on the 30th and say, you know what, the public just submitted 3 maps that all merit a lot of consideration. You might turn the 30th into a workshop where you decide on one of those 2 or 3 maps and actually adopt a resolution, or say you want more time and you can schedule a meeting on the 30th to come back in another week or 2. I just wanted you to not feel rushed. I know we kind of set, we're making history, 4 dates with kind of an anticipated hopeful timeline, but I just wanted to make it clear to you, Chairman, and the committee, that as we propose, I think there's some wisdom in having a cutoff date for the public by the 28th, and then to move the process along. And I wouldn't recommend, although if the committee, to do a second and a third round of public houses, okay? So you might get 2 or 3 maps that you're not even picturing right now that the public offers up, and you might want to digest it a little bit more within a committee. But the goal is to have one national champion, I guess, at the end of the day. Yeah, in this March Madness. It's not really March, but you get the point.
American
Sorry.
Gladiator stuff.
American Gladiator or Survivor or whatever. There's all kinds of analogies.
So I guess I have one particular question relating to that style, especially like, let's say if we were to set up this would be more for probably council or just for procedure wise. If we set up a deadline and the public sends in, let's say we set up a deadline 5 days before the next meeting for all the submissions for the final piece, and we've already created the agenda for the next one, but now we want to convert it to a workshop. Is it just the 48-hour limit before we can make a change to the agenda, saying, hey, we got 3, could be viable for at least bringing back up into discussion, then we can switch it up?
Yeah, I have, there's no issue, I'm sorry, I'm speaking. No. So I can, even if after I post the agenda, I can amend it without any issues as long as it's not, I haven't hit that 48 hours. After that, then there's certain criteria.
You could word it such that your last agenda item may be consideration of a resolution or an additional meeting to consider input. So give yourself some options in the agenda itself.
Right, and then we can just switch it up at the time of the meeting to make that first, okay.
Yeah, I think you could be prospective, right, legal clerk, and being very optimistic about what might be covered, and then when you meet, there's no obligation to actually have to consider the item. You could amend the agenda and say, we're not going to deal with number 3, but you can't add within the 48
Well,
hours if you want, so.
You can actually
Or
leave it on the agenda.
Leave it on the agenda.
Yes, you can just say no action taken.
No action taken,
Yeah, you
yes.
can't take it off.
Yeah.
Amend within the
No action.
48 hours, but you have to post it, and you have a motion at the beginning to accept the amended agenda. If you amend after you start, then it has to be for an emergency, and typically you can't take any action. So just
Let me make sure I'm tracking and understanding. So we could have potentially as our agenda, the consideration of public feedback and comments, including any potential new maps. And then as our final item, the recommendation, a resolution creation, or continuation of discussion at scheduling of discussion at next meeting, right? Or could that be part of the actions taken upon the discussion of the recommendations of public comment?
So you just have to word it correctly.
Okay.
For an item to be an action item, it has to be called out as an action, and then you have to describe what your potential action is.
I don't believe you have to agendize the fact that you may want to have another workshop date. I think that's what I was getting from.
I think that's correct. I think referencing that may just give the public a little more clarity. That you may or may not be adopting the resolution because you may want more time.
Okay. Thank you.
So I was just checking through back our dates. So I forgot the dates already from the open house, but the last one is the 19th?
Yep.
So then if we were to set up a final deadline of, let's say, the 24th, which would be the following Wednesday, would that be sufficient time to give it a minute? Whoever's administration who's handling the maps, if somebody submits a map that could then be dissected for the group?
So the 28th was what was suggested, that's a Sunday. And so from the time we actually have the open house, it gives the public more time to provide if they wanted to do their own.
Yeah, because you're not going to convene that Thursday or Friday, so setting that Wednesday deadline is, I don't want to say totally arbitrary. Like, you don't benefit from the Wednesday cutoff, does that make sense? If it's Wednesday or Sunday, because when you convene the 30th, whatever updated public comment we have will be circulated I guess some of it could be circulated ahead of time as part of a packet. I guess that would maybe be the benefit
That's
of,
kind of what I was wondering, because I was just thinking about, we all had such great, lovely maps from our last one, and you saw how our variety was as far as into that. And I think like this example was such a great piece of being able to kind of now simplify. So if we're getting other ones and they're coming in from a variety of forms, that opportunity of being able to see it in a clean format like this, I think would help get a visual for, as far as for the group, but that's.
we're happy to do whatever the pleasure of the committee is. I think if you want and that's why I kind of started by saying, you're not tied to the timeline. If you're not done on the 30th, if we stuck with the 28th, then clearly there wouldn't be a packet sent to you. We could probably provide real time maybe on that Monday, send an email out and say, that's okay to send exhibits out on Monday before they meet on Tuesday.
Yeah, just want to avoid a group email.
Yes, group
response
email
discussion.
response and pre-deliberation.
So in regards to the public submitting any other maps, if legal counsel was to review those maps and deem them not part of the criteria, do we still, as a committee, have to have those brought to us and presented?
It's part of your formal response, again, getting away from the kind of the Facebook
Sure.
off into the ether. Then it's probably worthwhile, we'll just note that this map doesn't meet the criteria, just so you see what was out there. Maybe it sparks an idea in relation to another map or whatever.
Sure, sure.
We can certainly call out which ones don't meet the 10%.
That would help.
Yeah,
greatly.
that way it doesn't, we're not sitting here having to decipher, it again.
Start with another 20 maps.
Yeah.
But if the deadline was the 24th, even though the information will be provided to you, you're not deliberating until that meeting
no.
on the 30th. So, and that's where I was kind of saying, if the deadline was the 28th, we were thinking like trying to give them as much time up until we can reasonably as staff on Monday, Tuesday, try to aggregate. And I think to be in good faith with the public, we are soliciting their input, and I think we have an obligation for the record to communicate it to you. Whether you want to go down line by line or how you want to acknowledge the comments that are reflected is going to be up to you as the chair of the committee and how to socialize. But I think this will be submitted in the record to reflect the minutes that it was presented to you for your consideration for what it's worth. Speaking of which, I think Mr. Chairman, I think, are we good on, maybe in the final motion, I know Amy's got to take off here shortly at 3.
Can I just ask to make sure that, so what I did provide was really not specific, but just kind of the seasons, summer 22 and fall of 2022, but because we really don't know, I don't know. Technically, the fall actually starts in December. So it gives us a lot more wiggle room in terms of a timeline. It's nice if we can present that information to the public so they know what the next steps are. But if we don't know those, I think summer's safe because we're here. But I could just also draw a dotted line, or I just don't want to, if this is going to be presented to city council before December, I want to provide accurate information, I guess, is what I'm saying.
I guess I have a question regarding what would need to happen. What exactly are the next steps after the resolution? So we create the resolution, and then what happens? It goes directly to city council the next meeting?
It doesn't specify when it has to go to council. The ordinance says it goes to council.
Okay.
And then the ordinance says they'll schedule a public hearing. They'll take comment and input. Under the ordinance, their ability is to review your resolution for compliance. They don't get to amend it themselves. They say it complies, okay, it's good. Or if they find substantial evidence that it doesn't comply, then they have to remand it back to you, and you're reconstituted to try again.
Okay. And so hypothetically, when is the next city council meeting?
Monday.
The-
then
no,
it's
I
on the
mean,
1st and
after
3rd.
after we're done.
Oh, after the 30th?
Yeah, after the 30th, when
Number
is
6,
September
it's
6th?
a Tuesday because it's a holiday on Monday.
Right. So that probably, does the council have to have time to review it before they discuss it in session, or they get it in session and discuss it? What exactly is the mechanism in the process?
So right now, they have the ability to look at the minutes and watch and so on.
Okay.
It's a little different than some of their quasi-judicial hearings that they have, where they have to be more detached. But I think it's a good idea to give them a little time to chew on it. Whether 6 days is enough, that's a little bit of a tight window.
Yeah, that's what I was
And
wondering.
we have printing deadlines for public hearing notices that
Okay.
complicate things.
So most likely would be in October then.
Yes, we discussed internally that there is some administrative discretion on our end. Of course, you can't make it shorter than necessary. We have to comply with the public meeting laws, but normally, once something, if it's an applicant for a land use thing or stuff, we, planning and zoning in consultation with the clerk's office and the mayors, we kind of try to spread out the load over council meetings. But, so we would meet with the mayor, and then there would probably be some time. But I mean, we're not probably talking months. Once you tee it up and send it, it would start the process. But whether it's October, November, you know,
Right.
yeah.
And I'm just looking at the ordinance, so I would have to publish a notice of a public hearing, and so that's 14 days prior to the public hearing that has to be in the newspaper. Then in addition, we would have to do this by ordinance, so I'd have to get legal involved.
But,
So we do need that. Once you guys are done and you approve the resolution, we will definitely need some leeway before we go to the council.
okay, that's where I was getting confused, because I wasn't sure if we formally had to present these findings in front of the council, here's our presentation, here's the stuff, and then they would decide and they would call a public hearing, or we just were done, and then a public hearing is the next time it's actually up. What does that look like? Does that make sense?
Conduct the public
Are we-
after they've already gotten it.
We publish, they approve the publication for public notice, so there's several steps that happen. And actually, I would have to
And I
convene
just-
with the mayor on, or unless you
And-
found it.
Yeah, well, I'm just looking at the ordinance. So the Napa Districting Committee shall transmit its resolution to the city clerk, and the city clerk shall schedule a public hearing before the city council on the resolution, make the resolution available on the City of Napa's website, publish a notice of hearing on the matter before the city council, and then that's when we take that ordinance. So they'll have a public hearing, and then typically is when you'll present the ordinance at that time. Otherwise, we can also do it at another hearing.
Yeah, I was
Or a
just
meeting, I should
thinking, and I'll take this offline, but usually when there's a public hearing, there's a presenter who's advocating for what's being considered applicant. So I don't know in this case if the expectation is that it's staff like myself, or if it's Adrian as the chair of the committee,
Goody.
or if it's a combination. So I'll have to determine that, but the ordinance doesn't call out, again, that's sort of an administrative function, but there is someone who's got to present. And then there's public comment, and then usually the applicant has a chance to provide rebuttal or response because there's public testimony that's taken. And the applicant, the person who's seeking the action, right, proposing the action to be considered, has an opportunity to have the final say in response to public input. And there would probably be value in that. We'll make sure that there's designated person to answer questions, because we would hate for there to be misinformation shared that would affect council's consideration without the opportunity to correct the record, so that they're not making a misinformed decision on the map. So again, that's an administrative thing that will have to happen, but the ordinance doesn't call it out. And
Well, and I was just gonna say, I think for Amy's thing, I think it would just make sense then for just doing like a ... for up until the fall. And that way it keeps it as open as much as possible. I know you have to go, so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I was just gonna add, yeah, and then I think really after that, the only other thing that just really has to be worried about as far as the ordinance is that there's the 135 days prior to the next general city election.
But that's not
That's-
until next
It's
2023.
23.
Right, but
Yeah.
so that's really the only, yeah, that's the final.
So if we get called back more than once, then it could start being.
Then we
a
could
problem.
start
But
looking into that, yeah, but
It's pretty far
that's
out.
really our only date that we have to worry about, so, in the end.
I'm really curious to see if anybody can come up with another map that meets the requirements.
School's back in session. Amy and I were joking, sorry, a little casual conversation, but so this would be a fun back-to-school project. Give extra credit to a kid who could come up with some mathematical, math government.
One of my daughter's looking at this too.
Yeah.
I might give my kid $20 if he could make it work, come up with some maps, so, sorry, sorry.
Do we have a budget
Strike
in this
that forward.
committee?
No, there is not, sorry.
That's a different action item, we'll have to work on it to that. Okay, so then as far as for this, I'm almost wondering if then we should have, we could really just do this all in one motion. As far as,
Make just a couple quick comments on that first page.
first-
We talked about those 3 bullet points, just so I'm on the same page, I guess, with you guys. That first bullet point, we would provide some additional language explaining the 10%, right? And then the second bullet point, I might suggest changing that word together to intact, and noting that precincts can't be divided, just so people really understand that.
Is that part of the legislation though?
That's part of, yes, part of the state law.
It says precincts have to be intact.
Can't
Okay.
divide them.
That was a question I had.
And then the third one, explaining contiguous, I might take out that word "or," like, it almost sounds like it has to be contiguous or touching, like they mean different things.
well, maybe just to make it easier.
Just say touching.
Say
Yeah,
touching,
just take-
yeah,
yeah.
just take out the or.
And just for the first bullet point, I know it says, according to the last decennial census, but I think it needs to be absolutely clear that we cannot take into consideration any projected growth, because that seems to be something that people were antsy about.
Another bullet point then, must be off of the current census, cannot take projected.
I think it would be good to put it
think
there,
that's a
because
good-
it was a big question we had, and
Yeah.
we've already captured it in the comments.
Yeah,
So I
So
think
I
it's
can-
good to tell people that.
yeah.
Okay, we can basically say population, without hitting them too hard over the head, but the population of Nampa, according to the last decennial census. And then we can add the language,
With no future growth.
yep, and that has to be
considered.
based on this number, not on projected growth.
Legal counsel. In regards to that 1670, because when I was initially doing the map, I thought I had a grace of 10% either way of that 16,700. So can we clarify that too, that 10% is 5 on either side of that 16,700?
That's not five.
Not exactly.
The highest
But it-
number
but it-
to the
it-
lowest number.
Yes,
I
there's
have a
a,
sentence here for you.
okay,
Population variance between zones must be within 10% from the smallest zone population to the largest.
so that's not exactly, that's close to it. The Supreme Court actually plugs in a formula, but it's the deviation, so you take your top number and how far it is from the optimal, that percentage, and then you take the bottom number and how far that is from the optimal, and then but the difference between those two is your deviation. And that has to be within 10%.
20%
That's what I was,
That's what,
No, it's, so, for example, let's say a number, your top number is 4% above the optimal number. And your bottom number is 4% below the optimal number. Your deviation is 8%.
Correct.
So that's what we have to describe, not just 10%. It's measured one way from the optimal number and another way from the optimal number.
And exceed that 10%, so,
Correct,
yeah.
correct.
Yeah,
Oh,
see,
I've
now that
corrected my
just-
sentence. Population deviation between, I just added the word deviation, took out variance.
Yeah.
Yes.
So could you read the whole sentence so we can have it?
Well, it's not exact.
And I may plug in the Supreme Court formula, because it's not a bad way for somebody to look at it. What does that
I can
mean?
understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Population deviation between zones must be within 10% from the smallest zone population to the largest.
Plus the
Now-
formula.
As long as that deviation is tied to your optimal number.
Yeah, and
Now-
I think we need to
Say that.
just plug in the formula.
Yeah, I think putting in that number, because I understand what you're saying. But I know that there are other people who would love to participate who may not understand that idea of the deviation. So I think if we have the language and then we say, hey, try it yourself, here's the formula, plug it in, see if it works. It can't be more than this, it can't be less than
We
this.
didn't understand
Yeah.
it
No.
for like 29 maps.
Yeah,
Right?
I sure thought it was 10%
Yeah.
Right.
over either
Yeah.
side there,
Yeah, because
off the 16,700, I
if we
thought.
don't clarify it, it's going to cause calamity.
Yeah, so what if we were to say the largest district cannot be more than 10% larger than the smallest district?
That's what we
That's the
did in
same
all of our
problem.
maps.
That's not exactly.
That's not it.
Yeah,
The
see,
larger
So that's
than
what I'm
the
saying, you have to have-
smallest
That's the
district.
problem.
So it can't be 10% larger than the smallest district.
And maybe it's because I'm an engineer, I do a lot of math, and so I'm saying smallest and largest. So the largest is automatically going to be above the mean, and the smallest is always going to be below the mean.
That's why I think the.
But-
That's why I said
Change.
10%
Give us a
between the
little more room.
smallest.
It's
Yeah.
a Supreme Court interpretation
Yeah,
of the Equal
they're wrong.
Protection Clause.
Yeah.
We're kind of stuck with it.
It's got to be balanced on both sides of that
Gosh.
16,700.
And I think that's where the formula comes in, because you can't dispute the formula. The formula is
This there you
X
go.
and Y.
Math is math.
You just say the Supreme Court mandates that it meets
Yes.
this formula.
Yes,
There you
yes,
go.
yes.
Yep.
And I would say just put that as one of the first bullet point, really.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what eliminated
Right. We have to
Yeah,
use the most,
97% of our maps right off the
right,
bat.
we have to use the most recent census, the numbers are blah. It has to meet this formula, here it is, try it yourself. And we will reevaluate in 10 years.
And no splitting of precincts, so.
So I'm capturing, I think you'll probably have an omnibus motion to capture, I think just in good faith, I'll be working with Amy, so I think I have remove together, replace with intact on the second bullet point. Precincts must be contiguous, touching, remove or.
Or
You wanna-
just take out contiguous and just say they must be touching, they have to
Right.
touch.
That is,
You can throw contiguous out of there,
Yeah.
the
too.
lawyers like the word contiguous, but touching
Yes.
just as good.
Don't touch me.
Contiguous, Daniel, stop it, that's a battery.
Would there be any harm in adding a parenthetical statement with 2020 to
Yeah.
determine the
That's the sentence.
Yeah.
Yes, the sentence, the census, the
Decennial.
decennial census.
I'll work that in.
Because
We're
I
making
think-
reference to what the literal census is
Yeah, I think a lot of people would not.
with the statement that it's to be determined as a snapshot on the population as of that census, not to take into consideration the growth since that.
You know, and one item that I was just thinking is, I like the word touching because it's nice and simple, but I'm actually thinking of we should stick back with contiguous, because somebody may just think touching is a corner. And I was just thinking, is there anywhere in here where somebody could accidentally view as like, oh, well, these corners are technically touching?
Well, I was going to say, a corner touch is contiguous
contiguous.
by state law. We use it for annexations all the
I
time.
will make some,
We're going to all go and come up with new maps now.
But
But I don't know if you can pull one of those off, just.
You
look-
could,
Right.
I mean.
you're talking
yeah,
about
I'd
like
have to
two
really-
squares that touch like this,
yeah.
Yes.
the tips, and then you could do,
See, when I
Like
think of
checkerboard,
contiguous, I
right.
think of.
You have to go to a
Right.
corner across the intersection to stay in your
I
zone.
was gonna say,
I don't know what the legislative intent was in the statute on the contiguous.
how close of touching?
boundary.
It's like, is this like
Touching
little
boundary
kids,
line.
I'm not touching you kind of thing?
Corners
or-
count.
I am breathing your air.
Just a clarification, as I read through the rest of it, I read, is our purpose we're creating districts. Okay? We are not creating a district map. That's the outcome of the districts. But it just, when I read this one right here, is the part of the process is to present a proposed map of the council districts, not for council districts, but it's of the council districts. And then I look at these give feedback things, and it says Napa District Committee is anticipated to finalize a district map. Do we need to have finalized the districts
Yeah.
for city council? Do we need to be that clear? That's just me being
I think
AR.
the
So
map
the ordinance
finalizes.
does say a map.
Yeah.
It does say a map in it? Okay, never mind.
And also, the seats are supposed to be designated by you guys.
The numbers. Yeah, which we have.
So we are finalizing a district map and council seat numbering.
Yes.
Well, the council could choose to accept our map, but with different numbers. They could decide that they want to start one at the bottom, right?
So
amend it.
I don't think so, the way the ordinance is written. This is what Meridian's going through right now. They're trying to minimize the collateral damage a little bit by switching one district number, 1 and 2.
All because the seats are 1 and 2, and they're like, hey,
But they have to change their ordinance to do it. And I don't know where the council will go. I get the vibe that they,
I just think, it seems like we make a recommendation, is what I'd read in there, and then they get to vote on it. So
yes.
if we recommend something, they say, well, I accept this recommendation with these changes. They could do that at the outset, and it's not changing 1 and 2. It's accepting the map from the beginning. Right?
So it would, if they want to, Kathleen, if they want to change anything about what you do, they have to send it back to you.
Oh, cool. That's so
Yeah.
much power.
And so what if we just say boo-hoo? Tough beans.
Yeah.
These are the
We
numbers
like
we
these
want.
numbers. We chose
Yeah.
these numbers.
And the
don't
numbering
know
of the
why it would
districts is
matter, but-
really not a legal issue. It's,
but they're fighting over it anyway.
they are, yeah.
That's
If they
Meridian,
really
though.
if they really got to be in their bonnet, they could change their ordinance and say, we get to alter the numbers a little bit.
Okay.
The legal requirements really apply to the
The
districts themselves.
Okay, so then we don't need to worry about drama with the numbers, if any occurs, because, so,
Well, we do, we
If
have to
they-
follow the ordinance.
right, if we follow the ordinance, and the ordinance says they can only object if our map is non-compliant, and the numbers have nothing to do with the compliance because we have the right number of districts, could they even reject it because they don't like the numbering?
They'd have to redo their ordinance.
The
Table it.
ordinance does say if they have substantial evidence, you're non-compliant, and I don't know how the numbers actually would
Yeah,
relate
so if
to
they
the
send it back to us and
substantial
we
evidence.
determine we're compliant and send it back to them, I don't know that there's anything they could do then.
It would be like a volley in tennis. They'd have
Everything else would
to,
have-
they'd probably change their ordinance to say, okay, we have some discretion to renumber things. But
And even then, the current ordinance is saying you have to have reasonable evidence to.
they, I mean, they have control over the ordinance. They,
I'm not sure why it,
Yeah.
And I got one more comment
the
to this.
numbers, well, the numbers are tied to how long you're, like when your seat's up for reelection, is that?
So typically, that was the other issue Rick and I were looking at earlier. The council members that are elected currently, they have a right to finish out their term as elected, regardless of how these numbers come down. So there'll be a little bit of a delayed implementation for a couple years to let those things catch up with each other. So if you renumber it differently, you may have an elected city council member or two in there that have to be able to finish their term. And that part will be figured out by the council as
So
far
will
as-
somebody serve a longer term now or a shorter term after the next election?
I don't
even
think
things
they,
out.
I don't think they can serve a longer term. They can serve what they're elected to.
So,
So the next one would be a shorter.
and we do a 50-50 split? We elect 3 at a time? Is that
Correct.
Okay. So that means 3 seats would be up for election next fall, 23. And then 3 years after that would be the next 3.
Unless the person sitting there was just elected, right?
So seats 2, 4, and 6 are up next year. I think no one would get a longer term, but maybe, I don't know, Kathleen, if what you're referring to and what Todd answered kind of, I don't know if you're envisioning,
get it.
this is just totally a hypothetical. So seats 2, 4, and 6, and their name tags are down, but let's just look over here. Dale Reynolds is in seat 4 and Bowers in seat 6, just as an exhibit.
Just appointed.
He was appointed, but he's in seat 4.
Is that,
They are up for, those seats are up next fall, but they will correspond to whatever 2, 4, and 6 in the map is. They'll have to live in the map. It could be that your District 4, Dale, hypothetically, Councilman Rodriguez, who's in seat 1, might live in Zone 4 once the maps are completed. He can finish out his term, which he'd still have 2 years left till 2025, in seat 1, which is an at-large term. Or, as I understand it, and Todd and I have talked about, he can choose to run next fall, to run and be elected in the seat, in the zone that he lives in. And if he wins that election, he would now get a 4-year term in the zone that he lives. He would vacate seat 1, and then we'll be talking about what the mayor then has to appoint to backfill if that scenario were to occur. If we then have to backfill, I think the intent would probably be to backfill someone who lives in the zones now that they're constructed. But technically, that was an at-large term that's on its way out. So there is some potential disruption where you actually have members in seats 1, 3, and 5 who might live in 2, 4, or 6 next year and choose to run.
But nobody's going to get a longer term than they were.
Correct. Yeah. If they win, they get a new 4-year term. If they
choose
lose,
not to run, then they can't run until the next election,
correct,
once that seat.
correct,
So-
correct.
Some will make that decision.
They get to serve out the remainder of their term if they choose to. If they don't choose to, they can run in their new district.
And we can't run for what, 6 years?
5 years.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm okay with that.
And then I had, just the final one was to add and bump, so the 3 bullet points, but you wanted it as bullet point number 1 is the statement about the,
4 bullet points.
yep. So adding to the very top, if I heard right, was the statement about the deviation population. And it sounded like you wanted that, us,
Well, I think
Amy, to
maybe that
incorporate
should
as
be
the
bullet
leading,
point number 2.
the bullet
Because
point number
first
2.
you're saying they got to be as even as possible, and
Yeah.
so it makes more sense to make that the second bullet.
Right, and the first bullet point is that it has to be the numbers in the 2020 census.
Okay.
We can't project, right? That's the first one?
Yeah, and we even say it, I think it looks like in one of these other ones, we say 2020
Right. So if
census,
we're
so we
just
might
saying
as well have it
to
added here too as
Yeah.
well.
Perfect. Okay, I captured everything, and I think the clerk too.
And then, the last one will be touching, since apparently corners can touch, and I don't know how well that would balance
We
well.
don't
if you
know
tell somebody to
legally
put
whether
2
that
blocks
would
on the
stand.
corners.
Borders,
I think they'd analyze it in from an annex.
because touching corners wouldn't
I
be a
think we'd
border.
get some pretty negative feedback from the public.
Yeah.
Well,
if we
that
had,
would
like,
create,
Corner here, corner there.
I think it would create some lonely precincts.
So
If people tried that.
here's a hypothetical.
That's not
Could have
allowed,
one
though.
like this. Well,
Precinct
That's what he was saying,
3212,
Yes,
if you look at the blocks. 3212
changes everything.
and 3412, which is southeast of it, touch. And then 3412 touches to 4513.
In 4413 too.
So you could literally have do you see what I'm saying? 3 precincts.
We can have a checkerboard,
Yes.
what it would look like.
Right, but like I was saying, I think if people tried that with the numbers, we would get lonely precincts somewhere in the middle that wouldn't be able to be joined with anybody else, and then we'd have bigger problems.
Yeah. It
Anyhow.
would be a weird precinct map.
It would.
Well, if we remember, our other maps, they looked very nice and pretty, but it was not necessarily, this one, you have the current one that we have presented. I mean, we have one, there's like only, what, 3 blocks, maybe? 2 blocks?
And then 5 is just.
That's really connected, but it's what we've considered as far as for that. That's the only
Well,
reason why I was
yeah.
going back into the whole corner thing. I wouldn't have even thought of that
Right,
being as
well,
touching,
yeah.
so. Okay. But, so as far as for the 4 bullet points, is everybody feeling good as far as for that?
Can we do a motion to get that part finalized before we move on to any other cleanup?
Well, and I was thinking that we do a motion of that one for the bullet points, and then just only calling it precincts for this one, so that way it's part of the,
But I think
Same
there were
one.
some other questions about the map.
You know, it's just me being
Yeah.
An engineer.
engineer. The numbers in black are areas of voting precincts. It was just wordsmithing. Our current precinct numbers,
Yeah. So I move, can I make a motion?
Yeah, you can,
Okay,
yeah.
I move that we accept the corrections as proposed to the language in the district requirements slide, poster board, what are we calling it?
this slide.
Slide, to reflect the fact that it's the 2020 census, to plug in the calculator for the districts, the numbers, the Supreme Court calculator, to clarify the language on the 3rd bullet point, where it's so to clarify the language on the 3rd and 4th bullet points, removing contiguous
And together.
and together.
Can I get a second? I'll second. Thank you, Kathleen. Discussion? Any other comments?
I think that was a finely worded motion.
Then if there's no other discussion, then all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Okay.
Okay. So now, I want to go back over to about the precincts, and does anybody want to make a motion as far as in relation to that? How we would like it to appear?
I move that we have a map created that removes, or on the current map that's online, we remove the legislative districts from the precinct numbers. And instead label them P38, P37, P.
And just to be clear, you're referring to the precinct map and population, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Can I get a se, oh.
sorry,
Let's-
and-
Well, now
and-
we have a motion, so. I'll
Okay,
ask first.
sorry.
Can I get a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you.
Okay,
Now we can
discussion.
discuss it.
Point of clarification. So the proposed city council district map also has the districts and precincts. Do we want to make them consistent, or are we going to deal with this map separately? So there are 2 maps. There's the one at the bottom of the page below the slides
Oh, I
that
see
has
what
the
you mean.
precincts.
Yeah, it's hidden up in there.
I think all of the maps that we're using for this project would remove the legislative district.
Any other?
Yeah, we want
But
uniformity.
add the P at the beginning to show that it's precinct.
Yeah, we want uniformity.
Craig, you got that?
Any other comments? No other comments, then all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I do have another motion. Never mind. We're good. I'm not going to make that change to the language.
Is it now we're all just dying?
It's just the,
Oh, the areas?
yeah, just current precinct areas instead of areas of voting precinct. I don't think that's a voting thing to vote on. No, I wouldn't, don't worry about it.
Let's see. I think oh, did we need to make a motion telling Amy that as far as for the summer into the fall, she was mentioning that that could be confusing if it looks like it's that?
No, I
That's
think-
just a general,
I think it was a head nod to just keep it as is, so since you're not recommending any changes.
I don't think there's anything to it, so yeah.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the rest of the maps as is.
Can I get a second?
I'll second it.
Discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. That's the last for this action.
Did you also, were you going to have a motion on the deadline to get stuff in?
Oh.
Well, it's
Point.
already,
Already in there?
It's already in here
on
on the
the
28th.
Got it, okay.
And then, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if it's helpful for the record to do a very quick summary of this, and I'm happy since Amy already stepped out, just so the record can show that these comments were received. Very briefly, there was,
First one, they're not in city limits, correct?
yes, there was 11 comments. Again, this press release went out Friday, so this is pretty much over the weekend. The first person is from Caldwell, but, and so they offer some comments. They do ask a clarifying question about why it doesn't show a boundary north of Chinden Road. Can you explain the discrepancy? We'll handle that internally as staff, so that's not
Okay.
your work to do, okay?
Okay.
There's a second comment from Sandra Forrester. She's in agreement with the map and thinks that the proposal is the best considering the limitations. There's a comment from a Luke Henry. He disagrees with the map. States that District 1 has 1,000 more people than District 5. District 1 has more people than any other district. It's possible to bring, I don't know if it's a question or if it's a statement. It's possible to bring part of the northern boundary of District 5 to further equalize the amount of people currently in each district. And as the committee commented on earlier, you can't shave off based on population. You'd have to move an entire precinct, which is thousands of people. So
But the response
Sends the
is,
merry-go-round.
it may be possible you can do your own map.
yeah, okay.
Will these
Yeah.
people be responded to, their comments?
Well, no, you know, we've only promised to receive comment for consideration. That's why I just want to kind of formalize, do a review here. If they're watching or want to watch this, they can hear that there's brief response. Yes.
So the proposal that he had here is to shave off some of the northern boundary of District 5 and add it to District 1, but they don't touch.
Yeah, they don't touch, correct.
Okay.
They don't touch. And even if you were to shave off part of the precincts, the precincts in the north of 5, if it's 3212, it's what, 8,200, 8,300 people?
Yeah.
There is no,
We all tried that. You moved
Yeah.
one precinct and then.
so if you're saying, hey, they have 1,000 more people, so why don't you equalize it? So I think, again, it just underscores the need for the PR per the boards that you have. He also said more apartments, multifamily units, and single-family homes are currently being constructed in District 1. This exacerbates the unfairness of how the proposed map is, so.
Cannot consider.
Yeah, so I think, but the sentiment, again, is reflective of some of the concerns that the committee raised, and we can't consider that. But if District 1 is already the largest and it's growing, the perception is that there's, you know, disproportion, or at least perceived disproportion based on the comment. So Daniel, did you?
So just as I was looking here, and I apologize that I'm saying this now, just as I was looking at District 5 based on that comment, just the District 5 boundary stops at Midway. The city limits already abut Midway at that point. Do we want to, it may be advisable to include the next eastmost precinct or western precinct from that has no population in the city of Nampa in that district, so that when things are annexed there, which will likely happen over the next 10 years, it's already assigned a district.
So you're talking
Is that a miss on our part then?
where Roosevelt and Midway are meeting?
Yeah, so that's
Midway Park.
Yeah.
4723.
Everything east of
So-
Midway.
so-
Or
4723.
west of Midway.
Yes, it would,
Okay,
This is your precinct.
I don't,
so 4723.
Was this a miss? Because I thought our city impact zone ended at Midway.
the impact area does, but that does not stop someone from annexing property in outside of the impact area. So I'd defer to Todd on what he
Well, I
thinks
think that comes
there.
up to what happened to us in our last meeting. We had to just kind of go by what we have now, because you had mentioned like.
And we thought we did
We
capture
did that,
everything, but
though.
we
We
might have
did
missed.
that. We already did this outside of the impact area,
Yeah.
all in 5 to the south.
Yeah,
And I already know the city has agreements with utility services.
We have utility service agreement with a property that is
I
on the
wanna-
west side of Midway, so that as soon as it does become contiguous, we will annex it.
And they need to be able to vote somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
Eh,
Todd, what do you think there?
Well, I don't know, because we're talking about dividing up the city into districts. I don't know that we can include a precinct that is,
We
Has
did
no
that
city
already, Todd.
limits.
We did that on
Well,
49, 23.
we had
Were
a
we
precinct that had
anticipated-
nothing. No,
Well,
no,
that's part of our impact zone,
was-
right? And this
Yeah,
is
there might be
not.
just a few citizens, but as there's continued growth, I think it came down to a legal right to vote. So if, let's say I'm the person east of Midway and I annex in next year and I want to vote next year and I show up and it's like, what zone do I get to vote for? We try to capture out of all the outline within our impact area, but this is where Daniel, and this is where it's helpful. and it Would have been helpful if you caught it earlier. Dan.
well, and I apologize for being on vacation during the last two meetings.
No, you don't.
We tried to touch everything where the impact area is, where there's potential growth, so that they
Because
know where to
we
vote. or-
do have a official agreement between the city and Caldwell that area down there in 47 would be in the city's impact area, not in Caldwell's. Now, the actual impact area adoption has never happened because of pushback from residents out there.
So where do we draw the boundary, though? Because we don't know. Some of that is in Caldwell, or
Well,
We have that
like,
elsewhere.
yeah, we have,
where are you
On
going to
Cleveland
draw the
Boulevard,
line?
too.
You just add that precinct to it, and it's going to stop at City of Caldwell.
Some of that
impact area.
precinct you're saying is Caldwell.
Right, but we have that same problem with,
Almost
well,
like
on
higher
the
precinct.
north side,
1510,
ending up against
1510.
the west.
And
On
so
2411,
I
yeah.
think what the proposal is, we include any Nampa city residents in the 4723 district who currently there are 0. But should anybody ever live in 4723?
They live there, it's just not part of the city yet.
Well, should they, right, so should any Nampa City residents ever live in 4723, until another decennial census, they're part of Zone 5, right?
Make that motion?
Okay, I move
I
that,
just made the motion.
oh, you did, okay, never mind,
You
sorry.
can second.
I can second it, I
second?
will second
Okay.
it then. I thought you were telling me to
Repeat my
make it.
motion, please?
Okay, so, he's making.
He's making the motion.
He's making the motion. I'm explaining my understanding of the motion so I can second it. Can I do that?
You already seconded it. but you
Oh,
can
okay.
Explain it now.
Any future
Oh,
residents?
okay, so how about you make
I'll
your
do
own
it.
motion, and then we'll go for it.
Any future City of Nampa residents that may live
In
4723.
23.
4723 would be part of precinct number 5,
District 5.
or District 5, excuse me.
Zone 5, actually, right?
District. Can I get a second?
Oh, me.
Stephen? Okay. Discussion?
Is there any others that we look at right now before we amend the rest of the map? What's the rest of the?
Is there any clarification from city staff that,
There are no other areas I see that where we would run into that issue.
Well, on 1510, did we do it on the last one where we took that one block that came in?
yes,
We included
So-
that one in the last?
So if you look at the proposed map, 1510 is included,
Okay,
so.
Yeah, it's in one.
all right.
I do want to say in response, since we're going through the comments. Well, first, I guess we need to vote on this motion, right?
Okay.
Okay, then all those in favor, please say aye.
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 But
You got that, Craig?
Going through the comments, so he's talking about future growth, which we cannot consider in Zone 1, but I would counter that there's been that same amount of growth probably in Zone 5,
Yeah,
Correct.
so.
Yeah. There's growth pretty much
That's
everywhere in the
some
city
That are
except
pretty
for,
locked,
right.
and those are very densely populated.
I think we can point out to these people too that have these concerns, that each district just is going to have one representative and one vote. So more or less population won't give anyone any more power than another or influence. You get just one vote per
That's
district.
the reason we had to have those numbers as tight as we.
Curious truth, and then would,
Every
let's
10
say
years.
in 10 years or 8 years when they do another census, this could all be redrawn again.
Yeah, as well as the state legislative reapportionments is it every 10 years? Yeah.
And-
So,
And so just for clarification for the record, when the next census numbers come out and the legislature does their redistricting, and then the county does their redistricting, we cannot do our redistricting as a city of Nampa until those two maps are complete, because we need the precincts from the county, correct? Okay.
I'm glad you're volunteering 10 years from now.
Oh, no, that's okay. That's for the record, that's for whoever's watching 10 years from now.
Too late, it's in the minutes.
what would be amazing is if the 6 districts grow at such a proportion that they're,
That would be great.
That would be great, yeah.
Population.
Just leave them as they are.
That would
Yeah.
be nice for that.
I don't,
And no precincts are reshuffled.
the precincts will be
But
reshuffled.
1 and 5 will be growing, and poor little 2 and 3 will, or 3 and
Be
4 will
landlocked.
just be
The same.
sitting there.
Landlocked.
Though they may see density increases that.
Yeah.
increase
I guess 4
Vertical.
and
Oh, that's
3,
true.
Vertical growth.
There is some proposed growth. Marissa O'Brien, she offered just agreement with no
She's my
comment.
neighbor, so.
Oh, is she? Is that the Marissa who works over here? Yeah.
Take her some cookies.
Sabina Halem disagrees and asks whether you're taking into consideration that Northside is getting a lot of new apartments. And we've kind of spoken to what seems to be negligence of growth that's happened since the census. And Nampa City Council should not just be people living on South Side. You all ignore North Side completely. So
Not enough population on the north side to by another precinct or
Right.
another district.
Dick Mottram disagrees. The area that I live in does not seem similar to the downtown area. Needs are different. Your map looks very skewed. The district should be similar, not one wrapped around another like you have done with 3. I don't like it at all. Dick Mottram lives at 2805 East Sandgate Avenue. So if I were to summarize his comments, it's a feeling that his district doesn't offer continuity as far as a community of interest, if I were to try to summarize it. Is there a way to pull up, Craig, that address?
He lives at Greenhurst and Midland, so he's actually in District 5, not in District 3.
Greenhurst and Midland? Is he your neighbor? Okay. You already looked it up. So he's in District,
Wait, it's
Wait,
East
East
Sandgate,
Sandgate?
so it's east of 12th.
So he's in District 4.
Is that not in San?
Or 3.
Or,
Oh, where is it?
oh no, 'cause if
I'm
he's-
thinking of the wrong place.
Isn't the divider 12th Avenue?
Yeah, 12, it is.
So
4413? Oh, that's
Okay.
Where
down
at? Right here.
between, that's down between South Side and Lewis. So that is very
Oh.
different from
Yeah.
Yeah.
downtown. However, the numbers do not work any other way.
correct, unless someone points out to you, I think that is a perceived concern, is that 3 is a wraparound district.
Right.
And you're taking kind of downtown core, and then you're going down into South Nampa and wrapping kind of around 4, and it's sandwiched between 4 and 3 with that thin strip up and down.
Yeah, I mean, that was my concern with, I think everybody's concerned with that district.
Right. But here's another benefit. We can all get more neighborly and figure out what each other needs, right?
Yeah, so I think, just, again, there will be more comments that you'll consider the next time. I think that, as far as presentation, that you're mitigating as much as you can, but Jennifer Medina says she's neutral, offered no comment. Brandy DePay, neutral, no comment. Becky Wheeler agrees, no comment. Rebecca Ortiz agrees, no comment. And then Anonymous disagrees and says 3, 4, and 5 are broken up to allow all current city council members to stay in their seats. So,
I don't know where the city council
I have no
members
idea either.
live.
districts 3, 4,
Oh,
yeah, it's anonymous.
that's half
Yeah.
the city.
Yeah, the odds are that 6 sitting council members are going to live within some of the council seats, so. I think that's a summary, Chairman, and that's the report out on the comments. And when we convene on our next meeting, we'll probably have more volume of comments, and Amy and I can try to work expeditiously to present out on those. And in the public houses, we're going to have opportunity for people to write comment, drop them in the comment box, but we're going to have to type those comments out to try to aggregate like a report that's clean and legible, so.
So we are going to then have physical comment cards. We're not going to just encourage people, scan this with your smartphone and give it to us.
I can talk to Amy. Usually we accommodate all of the above.
Okay.
So it's also just kind of a accommodation for people's preferences, so.
Let's see, so would that be, since the comments, would that be part of action 3 then? Since we reviewed the additional submitted?
But there is no action
There's no
associated.
action, so we'll. So then can I get is there any other questions or comments before we make a request for adjournment?
Oh, I do have a question. So I received the invitations for both of the open houses. I'm able to attend one and not the other. I know that we don't need a quorum there, but do we need representation from this body? And do we need to figure out who's going to be there to supply said representation?
Say something? Well, I can let you know that that has been noticed.
Okay.
So both the meeting dates have been noticed. Packets are out online. They're also posted at City Hall. So it is a noticed meeting. Workshop, so.
Is it noticed for the committee?
Here we go. You know what, I should have it right here.
If it is, then you guys can come and you don't have to worry about a quorum if you want to. You don't have to come.
I mean, notice for the committee.
As in, if we include those open houses as a potential committee meeting, then it's, you can be there.
Then we
So
don't.
many of us can go, so that would be what,
Okay.
4 of us?
But it also is kind of weird if you don't formally call it to order and all that, so.
Right, but I mean, so what happens if we have everybody show up at one meeting and nobody show up at the other? Is that a problem? Do we care? Does that make sense?
I think you're okay. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, right? The impetus here, I think the mayor is kind of charging me and Amy to make sure that we're getting the information to then provide for you for deliberation in your public meeting on the 30th. If you want to attend and hear in real time or engage citizens, I think council members, it's the same thing that applies to city council, that they may show up at something, and when we know that there's going to be more than 3, we try to post it. If there's an unavoidable situation where they show up at a workshop meeting or something that they're just not to interact with each other or offer any sort of deliberation towards the decision, that seems to, I'd look to legal for that. So would you advise them not to attend? Or to attend, or?
So it said open house. It doesn't really talk about the commission being there. So I'd say we wouldn't want a quorum there.
Okay.
I think if you want to stop by, I don't know that you feel obligated. Like Rick said, it's really more about them gathering info to present to you to discuss here.
Okay.
So.
Do we already know if some people here are planning to attend in either of the 2?
Well, I had replied yes to the invitation for the first one because I thought we needed to attend one or the other. But if we don't have to attend either, and it would be better not to attend either in order to avoid any awkwardness, I will plan not to attend. That's what I was wondering.
I was the same. I was going to come Tuesday night, but I think it sounds like it's probably better if we don't.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to attend the Friday one, so.
Wear a name badge so they know who to get after.
Yeah, let's say Roy Booth.
Committee member, don't
Roy
touch me.
Booth,
Yeah, go ahead.
all of
If
us.
you attend and there's not a quorum and you know some are going to be there, then I don't think there's a problem.
Okay.
And can we comment if,
I wouldn't comment, like submit comments, that's what this is for.
no, I meant,
But if somebody asks you a question, you can interact with them.
okay.
Explain why we wrapped around.
Ask Rick.
Okay.
I don't have anything better to do on a Friday night.
It's Friday,
one's on the date.
Friday
It's
afternoon.
11.
Friday afternoon, that one, yeah.
Bring a lunch.
Workday.
There you go. All right. Then can I get a motion for adjournment?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second it. All those in favor?